First of all, I want to say thank you for watching the videos. It does mean a lot to me. And also thank you for giving me the comments, because the comments help me to make sure that I can respond and make sure that I can educate and show all the things and explain them perfectly. What I wanted to do today was actually show you what I was talking about. Not just talk about it, but show you what I was talking about it and address all of the concerns or questions that you had. First and foremost, the Justice Pathway is a document that was built by humans, right? When ISLA started over 10 years ago, based on my experiences in multiple international schools, I set up a behavioral or discipline policy, which is pretty standard for any school. And I had that there. And I had tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. These tiers mean how you respond to certain behaviors. Is this the type of thing that the teacher deals with? Is this the type of thing that requires a parent conference? Is it the type of thing that comes to the principal's office? Or like at the most extreme case, is this the type of thing where students, the services should be denied, right? And you write those because they're standard procedure and you want to have them on paper. But I think most people know that ISLA, we don't operate like everybody else. We want to be human-centered. We want to be based on conflict resolution. And so over time, they felt a little, I don't know, they didn't feel like they were as relevant to us as what was going on the ground. With a group of students and teachers, in I think our second or third year at ISLA, we created the 3 core agreements: be kind, be caring, and be original. Those were built by humans, and we created agreements within our classes and some of those first few students. Now the school has expanded, we have hundreds of students, we have all grade levels, and we take these very basic agreements and we give them to the teacher, and then the teacher creates agreements with their students around be kind, be caring, and be original, right? Well, over some time, there were teachers who said that they felt like they wanted more clarity on how to respond if someone doesn't meet the expectations of be kind, be caring, or be original. They knew how to respond if it was something small, but if it keeps happening or if it was something that was extreme, what is the level of escalation? And I had meetings with humans, with teachers, where we debated, where we talked about the definitions, we talked about what should happen on the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth offense. And again, I'm talking about things like, it could be as small as interrupting, but that just becomes so persistent that you have to do something more than just say, hey, Joe, please stop interrupting, right? Or something even more egregious where a person completely cheats, or a person breaks someone's things intentionally, or imagine a person puts their hands on another kid. These types of things can happen. We wish they wouldn't, but they can happen. And the teachers wanted to know, what is the clarity about how we do it? From that, the Justice Pathway was born. And the Justice Pathway lays out clear definitions for those things. It also lays out clear definitions for the connection to that old behavior policy. How does that tier 1, tier 2, 3, 4 response connects to the be kind, be caring, be original? And I was able to create a lot of clarity. I built it and presented it to teachers. I got feedback from teachers, humans. Then we sent it out to our students, mostly our high school and secondary students that could read at this capacity, to get questions, to get responses. They wanted to know about this versus that. Does this fall into a tier 1 versus a tier 2? What about tier 2 to tier 3? And so over time, we continue to craft this. Another thing that's super important for you to know is that the responses, like the discipline response in a Justice Pathway, is not punishment. It's almost always an attempt to restore justice. Our entire Justice Pathway is a responsive framework for restoration and accountability. The final consequence usually involves a conversation with families, or a conversation with other staff members, or a conversation with our campus coordinators, or a conversation with me, right? And these are the things that we want to have happen. We want, when things fall apart, when 2 students disagree, when something goes awry, that we want to deal with the human in the situation. However, if you have these rules and these agreements and you present them to all of the students, you want to be fair. You don't want to have one teacher that's too strict with it, one teacher who's not. You don't want a student to say, well, this person said I could and this person said I can't. You don't want to have a teacher using their bias, right, to either decide to take this up the scale or not to take this up the scale and not base their answers on the agreements that we have. It's super important to me that the agreements, be kind, be caring, be original, not only are they agreements from the student side, but they're agreements from our side. If you fall short, this is what will happen, right? And when it happens, it's not me saying, Joe, I don't like you, Joe, I'm mad at you, Joe, you're a bad person. It's saying, according to the Justice Pathway, this meets the criteria for a Tier 2 response, which means we have to involve other teachers and have a meeting, right? That is really, really important because it holds us accountable, right? And it also aligns us. We have teachers in different parts of the country, we have teachers in different grades, and we want to make sure that the ISLA way is the clear way. All right, when I wrote the Justice Pathway, I wrote it, it's got a lot of clear things, and some of these things we've shared with parents, but there's way more to it. There's scenarios, like hypothetical situations, so that you figure out how it should be dealt with. And the document itself is a 33-page document, right? Because I was able to give as much clarity as the teachers and the staff and the students wanted. Now, the issue with that is that in a situation where we might have to take it up a notch, and again, I'm not talking about day-to-day stuff. I'm talking about moments when a teacher has to decide if this warrants a parent conference, if they have to decide if this warrants a meeting with me about the child's behavior. And you might think, well, every time a child misbehaves, we should contact Sean or we should contact the parent. But you don't really want that. You really don't want that, because in reality, these are kids, these are humans, they make mistakes, and we want to have the ability to deal with the kids in a human way in our class. But if it gets to a serious place, of course, that's why we've built this Justice Pathway. It makes sense. Now is the time that we need to involve others, and we need to let the kid know, look, according to the Justice Pathway, this is how we do it. I'm going to show you something on my computer screen here, because I think it'll walk us through like how it looks, right? So this on my screen is the Justice Pathway, and it is a giant document. I'll scroll through, but it has definitions, guiding agreements. You can see here, be kind, be caring, different behavioral categories that would fall into it, the definition of the tiers, purpose and philosophy. I was really able, honestly, with the help of AI, to take the stuff that we build as humans and create tons and tons of content of it. All of this has been vetted and reviewed by not just myself, but also other members of the admin team. I've sent it out to families and, of course, the students and the teachers that are tasked with dealing with this. It goes on and on. Let me show you a little bit more. There's appendices that go into clear definition of what be kind looks like, and the difference between be kind and primary versus secondary, the difference between be caring and all that. A quick reference guide to what it means, what you're upholding, what you're violating. And our teachers use this in class. If you look over here, look, that's 10 out of 33 pages. There's tips for how to communicate with families when things fall apart. There is a reintegration checklist. If we ever have to remove a student from class, what are the steps, right? All of this helps us have clarity and policy for our students and avoid any bias. Now, let me get to what I was talking about with this giant document and then the GPT. I totally get what you might think. If you think that a child misbehaves and then we just type it into ChatGPT and ask them what to do, I can understand why you would be upset with that. But that's not what this is for. What you're supposed to do here is when you have this big document and a teacher has a situation and they are going to communicate that situation to me, to a co-teacher, to a parent, and they want to make absolutely sure that they are communicating in the way that meets the agreement, then they have to go to this 33-page document and analyze this document to make sure that what they're saying meets the agreement. Well, that is very challenging, right? What you can do with this GPT, I only uploaded this 33-page document. Teachers are not going to ChatGPT. this GPT only analyzes this document. It only has one singular purpose. If something happens and I am going to describe the incident that happens, I go in and I type it. I don't have to type a student's name. I don't have to have any privacy issues. I type it in here and I ask, which is what this GPT does, I ask this GPT to analyze my description of the behavior and what the justice pathway says to do. Now, ultimately, a human makes the choice, not the GPT, on how to respond. If the justice pathway recommends a conversation with the coordinator, or if it recommends a conversation with the parent, that conversation is held between two humans, between the teacher and the parent. If that conversation happens with the director and it recommends suspension or something severe, I am going to, of course, make the decision myself. But having a document that helps me analyze the letter that I wrote, the agreement, the policy, really makes sure that my biases, the teacher's biases, none of that stuff comes into play. That we can really take the behavior on its face, the policy on its face, and find out what it says we should have done. And I think that's super important, right? Like when we write an employee contract, or we make a big sale of a house or a service, if something goes south, and I know many families are business leaders, if something goes south, the contract was written to protect both parties, to make sure that when it goes south, we know what to do. It's not an emotional choice. It's not like, oh, you did this to me, this is what I'm gonna do. No, let's see what the contract said. That's the whole purpose behind the justice pathway, and it's also the purpose behind this GPT. Let's look at a run through of the GPT, and then I think you'll see, oh, this is what it actually is doing. All right, come over here. All right, so this is Justice Pathway, and then I'm gonna go over here to my GPT. It's called the ISLA Justice Pathway that I built, and it guides ISLA staff through the Justice Pathway disciplinary recommendations. I come over here in this prompt, and I just describe the behavior. Now, normally, if a behavior has gotten to a point where it's gonna be reported and it's gonna go potentially to tier 1 or above, the teacher is sharing that in something we have called an incident report. And so they write that up anyways. They're either writing an email to parents, or they're writing that to their administrator to report the behavior. And when they write that incident report, they describe the who, what, when, where, and why of the circumstances. And they describe, based on prompts we've given them, things like, what have you tried before? How did that go, right? I have also trained this to ask those same types of questions if the teacher doesn't write enough. I'm gonna go and just walk us through like an example and show you why it would be better for us to have this unbiased view than just the teacher's biased view. Having this secondary opinion allows the teacher to feel like no matter what I personally feel, the justice pathway says this. And now I can marry those thoughts. If either of those, if myself or the justice pathway says I should escalate this to parent, to coordinator, or to director, then there's probably something there, right? But if I don't think it should, but the justice pathway thinks it should, now I know, oh, I probably should do that, right? Let me just write it here. I'm gonna write this. A 10-year-old child took another student's cell phone and hid it during class. The owner of the phone asked many times where her phone was, and the 10-year-old said repeatedly that they didn't know. The many staff members looked around for the phone. I'm describing an incident that really could happen. Phone. Eventually, everyone gave up, and the child went home thinking the phone was lost or stolen. Unfortunately, the phone had been hidden in the garden. It was left overnight, and it rained, damaging the phone. The student who hid it did not admit that they hid the phone until we reviewed videotape and saw the incident. All right, there you go. Now, before I press this, what do you think? It's clearly gonna go at least to a communication with the parent, right? It's almost certainly gonna involve other staff, likely the coordinator as well, since we're already involved in the camera. Is this a suspension? Does this go to the director? Do we have to potentially remove the child from school? Man, it would be nice if we knew exactly what the agreement said, right? Well, we could go to the 33-page justice pathway, or we could have this analyze what the justice pathway says. So let's see what the justice pathway says. This is a justice pathway aligned recommendation based on what you've shared. I'm grounding this guidance in ISLA's emphasis on restoration, accountability, and community safety with specific attention to the values of be caring and be original. First, here's my understanding. Please correct or add anything if needed. This is super important. I've trained it to do this because if the teacher hasn't added enough, the justice pathway can't give a proper response. It's a 10-year-old elementary student intentionally took another student's phone and hid it in the garden. Correct. Throughout the search, the student repeatedly denied knowing where it was. Correct. Multiple staff members spent time searching. Correct. Owner went home believing the phone was lost or stolen. Correct. It was left outside overnight in the rain and damaged. Correct. The student did not admit their actions until confronted with video evidence. Correct. Is all of the above accurate? Yes. It is best categorized under be caring, which is damage to community property, and be original, serious dishonesty. These typically require Tier 3 administrative intervention. Because of the intentionality and sustained dishonesty and real harm caused, this is not a Tier 2 case. You can imagine after getting caught, the kid cries, says they're sorry, and then you're thinking, well, all right, we'll just deal with this. That really happens. Like, that can happen, that a teacher can feel bad or worry how the parent might respond. I've been working in education for a long time. I'm telling you, that can actually happen. Here it says, recommended Tier 3 administrative intervention. Immediate administrative meeting led by the coordinator or campus leadership. A family conference is required for Tier 3. A written behavior agreement is required for Tier 3. And short-term removal from at least one period. Not as a punishment, but to reset, allow space for reflection, and prepare for reintegration. In that meeting, you're gonna pull the student into the office. They're gonna miss some sort of class. And then you're gonna do the restorative steps that our justice pathway recommends. Human steps, right? A restorative conversation between the two students, facilitated by a neutral adult. And that coordinator now has guidance to ask questions about to the students, how can trust be built again, right? For example, what needs to happen to repair the harm? We're gonna have support repairing the material harm. Should the family replace the phone that was stolen? Not stolen, but damaged. There needs to be a genuine apology. There is a reflection assignment where the student writes a reflection about what would you do differently next time? And then there is going to be a temporary trust and privilege limitation. We may need to remove some freedom from the child for a period of time because they have violated the agreements, right? Now, there is even a space where it says this would become Tier 4 if and only if the student refuses accountability, the family completely is unresponsive, or the behavior reveals some larger safety concern. And in this instant, that gives me guidance to say, coordinator, meet with them. That is an unfortunate situation, but kids can grow. We know it was a game that got out of hand. The kid probably forgot. I don't want to read into this too much. Let's give that kid an opportunity to apologize, learn from this, restore the relationship, and maybe restore the material harm of the phone, right? All of that is what our justice pathway says to do, and all of those steps are absolutely human. But having this as a backdrop for the big emotional decision that must come forth, because this involves a child, an allegation of theft, an allegation of property damage, an allegation of dishonesty. It involves the families, it involves the teacher, it involves a victim, it involves that victim's family who probably bought that phone. It involves coordinators and directors. And we take it super seriously when this type of stuff happens, but it's big, it's emotional, and we don't want the bias here. We want to make sure that we are doing the agreement as we said we would do it. That is what it does. That's how it works. And I hope that that clears up exactly how we use it. We would not, if for whatever reason we saw this and it said anything that we didn't believe met the expectations of the Justice Pathway, note, please, that our teachers, our coordinators, our students, and of course myself are all trained in how to use the Justice Pathway. It's just sitting there as a recommendation, and this really, really helps me. I still have to make the choice myself. I still am the judge that says, but to me, when I look at this is correct. And that is because the only thing that this GPT is trained on is to read the Justice Pathway, right? An analogy for this, before I let you go, is when you have a giant contract, right? I just purchased a generator for the school. And as part of the purchase, I got not only a contract for the installation and purchase of the generator, but also a maintenance contract. And it's long. It's like 6 pages long. It's in Spanish, so not my native language. And it has tons of provisions. It's written in legal language. And I would love to make sure that in no case are we at risk of being damaged. I take that contract and I also read it, of course, but I also I created a GPT on here that allows that GPT to look at that contract through 2 lenses. One, through Dominican law to make sure that it meets the legal requirements and that it's enforceable. And then 2, can it support and defend ISLA and myself and all of our interests to make sure that we're not going to have something bad happen to it. And it turns out it showed me a really cool thing that was missing. I had agreed to the purchase of the generator, I had agreed to the installation of the generator and the maintenance, and that was all clear, but there was no deadline set for payment and installation. It wasn't in the language. I had missed it in my perusal, and it said, look, you need to protect yourself. If for any reason you make this payment and then they say they're going to purchase it and install it this weekend, but if they don't, you don't have any recourse in this contract. And so you need to write that in. What happens if this is not installed within 30 days and then 10 days? I showed that to the company. They were in complete agreement, and it was awesome, and it protected our interests. That's also what we're trying to do here, is make sure that we protect everyone's interests. Student, teacher, staff, family, everyone. And the Justice Pathway and the way it's written and the language that it's written to restore justice, to mediate conflict, to get students back together, to let them learn. We believe that it can be best implemented through not only the human connection, but also making sure that we all agree to the same aligned justice pathway.